Hi everybody and welcome to today's video. My name is Matt and this is What Matters to Matt. Now, if you are new to my channel, first of all, welcome. Please consider subscribing. Not a hard sell, but I think you're going to like what I have to offer on this channel. I do a lot of things about running. Mostly it comes down to wanting to be the best I can be for my family. That is truly what matters to Matt. But today, what we're talking about is something that if you are following my channel, you're probably kind of a little bit surprised. Maybe not, but hear me out. Today we are talking about trail running. Now, if you have been following my channel, one of the big things I did this year, one of my big accomplishments was I ran my first ever marathon. Not being a runner at all, I decided I wanted to run a marathon. Not an ultra marathon, not a trail marathon, on the roads. And I did a ton of training on the roads. What I've decided as I train for my next marathon is that I wanted to mix things up a little bit in my training. And how I wanted to mix it up was to include a little bit, or maybe even a lot, we're gonna find out, of trail running into my training. And there's a number of different reasons why I want to do that. I've got a short trail run to go on today. Then we're gonna get back to the office and we're gonna chat about exactly why I've decided that I want trail running in my road running training plan for my next road marathon. All right. Hi everybody, and yes, welcome back to the office. That was a really fun run, and I'm finding out the more time I spend on trails, just the more fun I'm having as I kind of get out of my own head about having to run certain paces, having to do certain things that have just been so ingrained when I'm out there on my road runs, hitting those paces. And we'll talk all about that in a minute when I talk about the reasons why I'm doing some trail running in my marathon prep, in my road marathon prep. I did want to point out just the shirt I'm wearing. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it is a Mario shirt, and it once again reminds me of a sign. And I've talked about this sign in a couple of different videos, and I know some of you have seen signs like this when you're out on races, but my kids had made this sign when I did my marathon, and it's tap here to power up, and there's a little mushroom there. I've got my Mario shirt on today that my kids got me. That sign, a little bit of a surprise, I think, to my daughter when we actually run our 4K color run tomorrow as of recording this video. Not tomorrow as of when I actually get to edit this video, but tomorrow as of when I'm recording this video, we're going to be running this 4K Color My World Fun Run. Super excited about that. Going to do a video on that for sure, and probably a little bit more about our training because I realized I was lax on that. But that's enough about that. Let's get into today's video, and what I do want to talk about is running trails if you're someone who's training for a road marathon. Now, this has interested me for a few different reasons, and it's given me a couple of things to worry about. So I thought it was nice. I thought it would be nice to just go over all of the benefits that I think I'm going to get out of this. Not all of them. Probably going to do a whole host of videos on how I think trail running is going to benefit me in my road marathon training, or at least when I give updates on how training is going, you're going to find that out. But some of the benefits and a couple of things that you still have to be aware of if you are training for a road marathon and you want to get off-road and do some of your training runs on those trails. Without any more of me just rambling on about random things, let's get into what some of those bonuses, what some of those good things are about running on trails if you're training for a road marathon. So first things first, I think it's really important that I define what I mean when I say trail running, because I think in our own minds, we might have different definitions of this because it can be a little bit wavery. But for me, trail running, for the purpose of my training, is I'm thinking of anything that is just not paved, not concrete, not those sidewalks, and not the paved trails in the park. I'm thinking of anything that is a looser surface or softer surface. It doesn't have to be those high verts, those running in the mountains, doing those ultra marathons, just getting off the roads essentially. And it's important to define that because I think that really lends itself to the reasons why I think it could be benefit to me to do some trail running with my road running training. Okay, so that first benefit that I have with running on trails to train for my marathon is this idea of reduced injury risk. Now, if you are running on the roads constantly and you're training for something like a half marathon or a full marathon, there's this whole repetitive use injury thing that really can creep up quite quickly. You're doing the same motion over and over again. You're running on a flat, even surface. Now, if you're running on trails, that is non-existent. Of course, some of those trails that I define as trails are just these buffed out trails that it could be very, very easy to run on and keep your cadence up and do proper or proper-ish running. But so much you're running on those trails is running over roots and rocks and left and rights and shortening and lengthening your stride and really paying attention to what's in front of you and having to make those adjustments. And you just don't have that same overuse injury risk that you have when you're doing the same motion over and over again that you do on the roads. Now, the second part, when it comes to a benefit of reduced injury on the trails, and it kind of comes back to when I define what a trail is just the pounding of that surface. When you're running on the roads, when you're running on the pavement, when you're running on the concrete, the joints take a beating if you're doing that over and over again. And one of the ways to kind of ease up on that is to do some of your easy runs, some of your lighter work, any of your work really at all. When you move that over to a trail, even if it's a dirt path, it doesn't have to be something that's high up in the mountains, like I said before, or something that's in really soft, muddy terrain. Even as soon as you get off that paved surface, for me, I notice an immediate benefit in just not having that pounding to the joints that I get when I'm running on paved or concrete or really, really hard surfaces that we always run on when we're doing our road training. And the second big benefit I have is building that aerobic base. Now, if you have ever trained for an endurance event before, and you've looked on Google or YouTube or talked to experts in the know, you've probably heard about this sort of thing, whether it be Maffetone, the 80-20 rule, this whole idea of run slow to get fast. And I've done other videos on this because it does actually work. You need to work in those low zones in terms of heart rate or effort in order to build up that endurance over the long run. Something like a marathon is not something that you're going to be running all out all the time. And I find when I'm out there running on the trails, when I'm negotiating the routes and the rocks and the hills, it's just so much easier for me to do that, sort of keep in those easy zones. And that's what a lot of my trail running is. I'm not looking for these up-tempo runs. Now, there is a caveat to this sometimes, and the other day, I did go to the local park, and technically I would consider myself on trails when I was running there, and I was doing hill repeats because sometimes the trails are the best times to do that, or the best ways or the best places where you can find those hills. But for the most part, for me, how I'm incorporating trail running into my marathon prep is to do some of my easy running, some of the stuff, get out there and really enjoy being out there in the nature and on the trails. And I find using trail running to build up that aerobic base, throwing those numbers out the window, not tied to any specific pace, is just so much easier when I'm out there on the trails. So we've reached that point in the video where I do want to ask you, if you are liking this video so far, please consider subscribing. I know I asked that a few times in this video, but it really does help me out a lot. And I also want to ask you that question to comment in the comment section down below. Do you use trail running to train for a road race of any kind, or vice versa? Do you find yourself on the road sometimes when you're training for that ultra or for any trail race? Like to know, leave that in the comment section down below. Let's get back to talking about some of the benefits I have to running on the trails to train for a road race. Now, I know so far everything that I've said about why trail running is going to be a benefit to me really makes it sound like a walk in the park. I'm going to be using it for running on softer surfaces to prevent injuries. I'm going to be using it for my easy days because I'm less tied to my watch and the pace and the time that I'm going to be running. But I want to flip that on the head just a little bit, because running on trails is not just about running easy, and it can have some benefits in other ways in terms of your workouts. Couple of the things I want to mention here, and if you are somebody who hasn't run any on trails, and when I'm talking trails here, I'm not talking about maybe your park trails, I'm talking more about when you're hopping over roots and rocks and having to really negotiate things on something that might be a little bit more technical. It might include some vert. One of the strange things that happened to me when I started running on these kinds of trails was that some of my fatigue kind of crept up on me. I was cruising along and then all of a sudden I was tired. And why was I tired? Well, because I was doing all that negotiating. I was hopping, I was running, I was negotiating all those rocks and roots and changing my paces, running a little bit of vert and doing all these things. And my heart rate never really spiked at any given point because I wasn't necessarily doing any of these things for an extended period of time. But all this negotiating of all these different surfaces really fatigues the muscles and works on these different muscles that you don't get from just running in a straight line when you're running on the roads. The other thing, the other benefit to running on trails when it comes to just muscle development and becoming stronger and where you might be fitter beyond just using it for these slow, easy paces and not tied to your watch, is this vertical that you're going to get from some of the trails. We've heard this before. If you haven't heard this before, you're hearing this for the first time. But doing some vert, doing some hill repeats, doing some hills is kind of like tempo runs, speed workouts in disguise. But being able to actually do that, some of these times when you do want to pick up the pace and you do want to push yourself, you can still get the benefits of sort of relieving the pressure on your joints instead of doing these tempo workouts on the pavements, on the roads, or at the track. When you're doing some vert and you're picking up the pace and picking up your heart rate and doing some of those hill repeats, they're just a little bit easier to find on the trails. And overall, if you run a trail versus running on the roads, just on average, of course there are going to be outliers there if you pick them, but on average, the trail, just being out there and negotiating all those hills, if you look at your stats at the end of your run, you're going to see that you're going to do a whole lot more vert when you're out there on the trails, and you're probably going to feel that whether it's the same day or the next day, and you can tell that you've actually worked some of those muscle groups that you just don't work when you're out there running on the roads. So this next big benefit that I have, I know there's some people out there, it's not going to be for them and they're going to find it maybe a little bit hokey, but one of the big reasons why I got into running in the first place, or even just started focusing a whole lot more on my physical health, was this whole idea of the benefits I see in my mental health. And when I'm out there running, even when I'm out there running on the roads, I get to disconnect from so many different things. I get to be kind of in my own space, whether I'm listening to music or a podcast, whatever it is, I get to get out there on my run, and it feels like it's really beneficial to my mental health. But take that to a whole nother level when you're out there on the trails, running out there in nature. I found what was really, really funny for me was I had such a habit of putting my headphones in, listening to music, listening to podcasts, getting there out on my road run, that I did that for the first couple of times that I really went on some longer runs out on the trails. And after those first couple of runs, I realized I really, really like just being out there in nature. So I ditched the headphones, listened to the birds, listened to the trees, listened to ultimately the quietness of it all, being out there in the woods, out there on the trails. And that has had some huge benefits in my ability to kind of disconnect from everything and make it my own time. And lastly here on the benefits side of things is that you don't need anything special. Now, if you do keep up with my channel, and again, I encourage you to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, but one of the next videos that are going to come out, you can see maybe I'll try to point to it, a red pair of shoes back there. That's the Salomon Pulsar trails, and I will be doing a full review on that here very, very shortly. But you don't necessarily need trail runs to run in the trail. Certainly they're beneficial if you're going to get into things that are more technical, more hills, more mud, more rocks and roots, but you don't need a trail running shoe to run out on the trails. Any road shoe will do. Obviously, the more traction, the better when it comes to some of these things, but you're able to get away with just whatever you normally run with. You have to be aware of some of the different terrain you're on. And one of the reasons, honestly, why I ended up going with a trail shoe is that I wanted to test myself on some more technical stuff as well. But you don't need a trail running shoe to get out there and actually run on the trails. All right, so we defined trail running, or at least what it means to me, and we've talked about some of the benefits I think I'm gonna get out of running on those trails, but I do wanna go over just maybe there's two. I think there's two in my head of things that I think you might wanna be aware of, or at least I'm aware of, that I don't want to call them negatives, but just things you want to pay attention to if you are going to incorporate trail running into your road running training. First, I want to talk about this idea of specificity. Now, again, I want to stress that these aren't things that I consider to be negatives, just things that I think I need to be aware of if I'm going to incorporate trail running into my road running training is specificity. When I went out and I talked to a couple of different coaches out there and different people in the know, one of the things that came up a couple of times is making sure that the bulk of your training is in an area or on a surface that's going to be relatively similar to what you're actually going to be training for your marathon or for whatever race you're going to be doing. So you don't want to spend most of your time on the trails. Similarly, if you're doing a marathon that has a lot of hills, you don't want to be spending all of your time just running on flats. You want to get some hill training done. Same thing sort of applies here. You want to get used to that repetitive nature of moving forward, not negotiating all those rocks and roots. And you want to get used to the pounding of the pavement. So a lot of your long runs, a lot of your up-tempo stuff, a lot of this different stuff still has to be done on the pavement, but you can still move over some of it to the trails for some of the benefits that I talked about earlier. But specificity to your training and making sure that the bulk is still where it needs to be in terms of you getting used to what you're going to be racing on is very, very important. Second thing I'll bring up here is planning. It's very important that you're planning things out when you're going to be out there running on the trails. It's quite different for me when I'm out running on the roads. If I look at my schedule, if I look at my calendar, on most days, unless I've got something very, very specific, I don't have to do a whole lot of planning to get out there and run the roads. I know if I lace up my shoes, get out the door, I'm gonna find a road that's gonna do exactly what I need it to do for whatever run or whatever training I'm doing. When you're gonna be out there training on the trails or running on the trails, you need to do it with a little bit more intent. You need to pay a little bit more attention to the trails that are out there. Now, obviously, once you get more experience and you get into discovering those trails that you really, really like and you're gonna go back to time and time again, maybe you have to do less of this. But for me, at least initially and probably in the future, a little bit more planning involved, a little bit less of the out and back sort of scenario that we can see so much. We just want to lace up and get out the door and come back or loop around that we have in road running. So planning is a little bit more important when it comes to trail running. That's it, guys. That's what I have so far in terms of why I think trail running is going to be such a benefit for me in my road training. My name is Matt. This is What Matters to Matt, and ultimately what matters to me most is my family. I'll see you in the next one.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.